Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining tonight. This is the first time we're doing this for Morgan Hill, so please don't hesitate to offer any feedback or comments. I believe you all have the candidate instruction guide, so this goes into more detail on the various topics that we're going to go over tonight. This is also on our website, and I'll send you a link to it. And then this recording will also be posted on our website and shared out in our next 411, so anybody who couldn't join us tonight can see it. And then lastly, for those folks that do end up running for office, we'll go into excruciating detail through the candidate guide when you make your appointment to receive nomination papers. So with that, my name is Michelle Bigelow. I'm the city clerk and the public information officer. I've been with the city for just over 14 years. I've been in the city clerk's office for 12 of those years, and I just love working for and serving Morgan Hill. I think we have a fantastic community, and I'm excited to see how this election goes. It'll be an interesting one. So tonight we're going to go over the nomination process, including eligibility, the nomination papers and other documentation, the various deadlines, and any questions that haven't been answered throughout the presentation. We can address those at the end. So our city clerk election team is comprised of myself, the city clerk, and then we have two deputy city clerks, Angie Gonzalez and Kim Mancera. And so as folks make appointments to pull their nomination papers, it will be with one of the three of us, and any of one of the three of us can help you if you have questions or need other information, etc. And so what do we do as the elections filing officer? So we are your primary contact for city council or mayor candidates for the city of Morgan Hill. We work directly with the registrar of voters in ensuring that they have the forms they need for the election. The registrar of voters office did recently hold their own training, and that's part of what prompted this training is we do have a little bit different process, and because we are the elections official for Morgan Hill, we wanted to make sure that any potential candidates got information from us because our processes are a little bit different. We are the only people, the city clerk and the deputy city clerks, that can provide you with nomination papers and receive your nomination papers. We will also receive all of your campaign finance forms, so you may be familiar that we have an electronic filing system called NetFile. And once you submit your 501, which is your candidate intention statement, and your 410, which is your form stating that you're gonna create a committee to raise and spend money for your campaign, then we put that in our NetFile system, and you'll get notifications when filings are due. You can go in and see your current filings. After I review any, if there are needed amendments, you'll get a notification for that. And then that is also linked on our website, and it's public facing. So the public facing portions of those documents, anybody can go and search those on our website. We also answer questions about the elections process. We cannot provide legal advice, and sometimes questions are posed to us that may not seem like a legal question from potential candidates or candidates, but they are. Our city attorney can weigh in on some of those questions, and in some cases, he may advise you to speak to your own attorney depending on what the situation is. If you have specific questions about any type of FPPC filing, so that's your Form 700, your Form 410, your 460, 470, 496, 497, they are really who you would ask questions of. We are not permitted to answer questions outside of really basic questions on those forms. And when we receive those forms, we do a cursory review just to make sure that you've checked the appropriate boxes, that your math lines up, and that's pretty much it. If there are any inquiries or questions or concerns, that's all directed to the FPPC.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Oh. So becoming an elected official, you would go through the nomination process, and we'll go through that information in a little bit. It's really important to consider that you will be in the public eye, and that public officials are held to a different standard than most other community members. And you will get thrust into that public eye in a whole new way, and some of you may have experience with that. And we also live in a time where everybody is on social media. I think it's important to just think about how you are perceived in the community, and one thing they teach us in city clerk training is perception is reality. It's really important to consider how you are perceived by the community, and to remember that you don't only represent yourselves, but you do represent all of the city as an elected official or even a candidate. We will go through required disclosures, so those are those forms, the 460, 470, 496, 497, in addition to your Form 4700, so I'll go into more detail on those in a minute. And another important thing to consider in running for office is being available to the public. It's not a requirement, but I would strongly recommend that should you become an elected official, that you make time in your schedule, whether it's set days or office hours or coffee with the mayor or council person, that you have opportunities to meet with and hear from your constituency. So, as you know, our election is November 8th. This is a general election, and our voters will elect a mayor at large. And what that means is that every registered voter within the city of Morgan Hill can vote for and elect a mayor. We will also elect 2 council members, one for District B and one for District D. If folks are running for office, they have to live in one of those 2 districts, and only registered voters in those districts can vote for their respective candidate. So a registered voter in District A, C, or D cannot vote for a District B council member. The mayor is a 2-year term, and the council are 4-year terms, and this is by design so that the voters have the power to make a majority shift in the elected city council every 2 years should they feel the need to do so. There are no term limits. So what does it take to run for office? It's pretty simple. You have to be 18 years or older and a U.S. citizen. If you are the mayor, you have to be registered to vote somewhere within Morgan Hill's city limits. And if you are running for council member in districts B or D, you must be registered to vote and live in your respective district. So the nomination period opens on Monday, July 18th, and it closes on Friday, August 12th. So that is the time where candidates will make appointments to come in and meet with my team and pull their nomination papers, ask questions, and you also need to submit your nomination papers within that period. If an incumbent chooses to not run for office, or should they not qualify, then the nomination period for that office is extended to Wednesday, August 17th. Appointments are required to both pull your nomination papers and submit them. I do encourage you to make your appointments early, and I would just suggest if you decide to pull papers, that you don't wait till August 12th to submit them. And I'll go into this a little more in a second, but you want to give yourself a little bit of room should anything come up that you need to address. So when you come in, should you come in to pull papers and run for office, this is an example of some of the forms that we'll go over with you. We do have a pretty comprehensive candidate binder we'll issue you, and you can have that either in hard copy or a digital version or both. We have a candidate handbook, which includes your nomination paper. The nomination paper is what you will go out and get signatures. And so in order to run for office, you need to have 20 signatures to run for that office as a minimum. I strongly encourage you to get at least 30. Oftentimes folks don't realize that they're registered at a different address, or maybe they live in a different district, or in Morgan Hill, as you probably know, we have a lot of Morgan Hill addresses that are in the unincorporated area, and sometimes people don't know the distinction between the unincorporated and the city limits. Your candidate statement of qualifications, we're going to go into more detail on that later. Same with the ballot designation. You're going to go over the code of fair campaign practices and a pledge, which is optional to abide by fair campaign practices. We'll go over sign responsibility, and essentially what that means is Morgan Hill has a sign responsibility form that we ask you to read and sign, essentially stating that you're going to follow the municipal code, our city laws, and state laws around campaign signs. We do not govern campaign signs on private property, and campaign signs put on public property will be removed. We do keep them, and so you have time to get them back, because we do understand they're expensive. But sometimes our volunteers for campaigns get a little overzealous and place them all over. I can tell you in the last election we pulled about 20 campaign signs just off this small city campus right here. We do keep them, and we will notify you that they've been pulled, but if you were to put out signs and you happen to notice they're no longer there, you can contact our office to retrieve them. Candidate information forms, which are essentially telling us what information can be released to the community. Transliteration form, which has to do with the Chinese transliteration of your name, Vietnamese accents, and then the related Political Reform Act forms that we've talked about a little bit, the 501, 410, 460, 470, 496, 497. So like I said earlier, your nomination form is going to have space for 30 signatures, and I strongly encourage that you get 30 if you can. Another important point that I didn't mention earlier is the same person can sign multiple nomination papers. And it doesn't matter whose they signed first. What matters is whose gets to the ROV and gets validated first. So if, resident Joe Smith signs 4 people's nomination forms and person 4 gets his in first, that's whose signature it will count on. And the other thing is, a lot of times folks have moved. You would be surprised at how many people do not keep up on their voter registration. So they've either moved and they're no longer registered to vote at their current address, or like I mentioned earlier, they don't actually live within the city of Morgan Hill limits. So we really encourage you to get more. And this is the same reason I encourage you not to wait until the August 12th deadline, because should you come in on August 12th, I'm gonna get those papers to the ROV, and if you don't have the minimum 20 signatures, you are not able to run for office. So I really encourage you to get them in sooner. The ROV is very quick about turning them around. It's usually 24 hours, at the most 48, because they're getting them from all over the county. You can only have one circulator. So that can be you. You can go door to door, out to the farmer's market, to the park, wherever you'd like, and gather your signatures. You can have a volunteer do that for you, but you can't take turns. The same person who starts has to stop, and you will sign an affidavit to that fact on the back of your nomination form. If for some reason you get signatures and the registrar of voters says, hey, we're short 2 signatures, we can issue you supplemental nomination papers, so you can go out and get those additional signatures that are needed. Should something like that happen, I would suggest that you get double the amount you need. So if you're short 2 signatures, get at least 4. If you're short 4, try to get at least 8. And like I said, they do need to be filed and qualified by the end of the nomination period. So you can come in on Friday, August 12th, at, assuming you have a 3:30 appointment, submit your papers, and that's fine, and then we'll qualify them. But if anything is amiss, you will not be able to run for election in this election. So a candidate statement is optional. There is a fairly significant cost for the candidate statement. We have the costs listed here, and these are determined by the registrar of voters. So we consolidate with them to conduct the elections, and they dictate these costs. The city does split that cost with the candidate. So for the mayor seat, the candidate statement is $2,750. Your portion would be $1,375. And for council members in District B, your portion would be $1,225, and for District D, it would be $1,235, and that is dictated by the number of registered voters in those districts. We do collect that check when you submit your candidate statement, and when you make your appointment to submit your forms, you're going to submit all of your nomination forms at one time. We do not take them here or there. It's really important that they all come in together, and we check them all together and make sure that everything is complete and accurate, and then we send the relevant forms up to the registrar of voters. You are limited to 200 words, and it's really an opportunity to talk to your education, qualifications. It is a fairly expensive item, but I would highly recommend you consider it, because it's a great opportunity to tell the voters a little bit about yourself. For those voters that maybe haven't had an opportunity to meet you out in the community and they're just gonna get their voter guide, that's where they're gonna read a little bit about you. So it's a good opportunity to just tell people who you are, what you're about, what your values are, why you're running for office, etc. The ballot designation is also optional, and we will go into deep detail in this when we issue nomination papers. It's typically a 3-word limit, and it's like 98% of the time it's limited to 3 words. There are a few exceptions, and this is typically your vocation, occupation, or profession. So for example, you might have John Smith, firefighter is his occupation. It could be Michelle Bigelow, city clerk. There are a ton of nuances with this, and I won't go into those right now, and there are more details in your candidate instruction guide. And when we issue the nomination papers, we'll go through that in greater detail as well. Okay, campaign finance. It's governed by the Political Reform Act, and the Fair Political Practices Commission, the FPPC, is the governing and enforcing authority. So you're gonna have public disclosure on your campaign materials, and so what that means is if you put out a flyer or a billboard or you have door hangers, you have to disclose on those what committee is funding them. You also need to disclose your financial interests, and so that's your Form 700, and that's your financial conflict of interest form. And so you will submit one as a candidate, And then should you get elected, you will have an annual obligation to file one as an elected official. And then in addition to that, you have public disclosure of your campaign contributions and expenditures. And so we would send you an electronic link like I talked about earlier, and that's where you can file your 460s, 470s, 496s, and 497s. So I'll quickly go through those. For candidates who do not plan to raise or spend $2,000 or more on their campaign, they can file a Form 470, and that essentially says, I don't plan to spend more than $2,000 or raise more than $2,000 for my campaign. That can change though. Should through the process of your campaign that changes, you would simply file a 410, get your committee started, and then do your 460 filings. We do have specific dates throughout the election process where those 460 filings are due, and then once you get elected into office, I should say regardless, after the election, whether you're elected or not, you will have semi-annual filing requirements, and so you can keep your committee open for a specific amount of time, but the state laws have recently changed around those campaigns, and if you are not elected, there's a certain amount of time that you have to close your campaign. So anybody who has an open campaign, it's on our website, and so you'll see that there's folks who've had open campaigns for years. You can go see that information on our website. Once somebody closes their campaign, we do, for our records retention, have them kept. I believe it's either 5 or 7 years following the election, and then we would go through and destroy those for any that aren't current or active. But yes, you can access them, and if there's something that you're wanting to see that is not e-filed, perhaps it was just before we started having that, we do have those records and you can request those.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And it is required that you follow these forms to qualify as a candidate. So it's just an important part of the process, and we do strongly recommend that candidates work with a treasurer if at all possible. It's not required, but it's a very good idea to have somebody that can help you manage all these forms. And it might, and a lot of times candidates will assign themselves as the assistant treasurer, so they can fill in as needed, or if their treasurer's out, but I do really recommend working with a treasurer because it can be a lot to manage this, and I'm sure you'll be very busy campaigning throughout your campaign. Okay, so what happens after the filing period? So after the filing period, we will hold a council candidate orientation. We don't have a date set for that yet, but it will be in August. And what we do there is we have the city manager come in, typically with our leadership team, all of our directors, and we'll go over current issues before the city council, how we operate, our budget, operations and services, and then city projects that are currently going on or expected to go on in the near future. And that's just to kind of give candidates an idea of what is going on. Candidates can also request to set up meetings with the city manager if there are certain topics they want to learn more about. You know, as a part of their campaign, there may be things that are really important to you as a candidate and you want to share that information. You can meet with the city manager, and as appropriate, she'll bring in department directors to share that information with you. So once you're elected, then what? So there is a few things. Ethics. There is a requirement to complete a 2-hour ethics training every 2 years. The city also has its own ethics policy that our elected officials and city teammates acknowledge and sign annually. You are subject to the Public Records Act, and that is ever changing, but essentially it means that your texts, emails, social media posts, etc., could be subject to the public records request depending on the purview of them. Typically anything city related is disclosable. Even if it's on your personal social media, your personal email, your personal cell phone, it could be disclosable. We strongly recommend that people running for office set up a separate social media account or accounts for their campaign. Additionally, should you be elected, we would suggest perhaps either transitioning that or setting up a separate elected official social media and campaign. We recommend that you have, as an elected official, you would get a city email address, so it's easy to separate those. And consider, you don't have to, but some folks have gone as far as having a separate tablet or computer that they do their city work on, so should a PRA come up, they don't have to weed through their personal things to try to figure out what to disclose. So just some best practices and something to consider. Brown Act is our open meeting laws, and so they're broad in scope. And for example, as a candidate, should you be talking with either current incumbents or other candidates to try to decide a matter, or you talk about how you feel about a matter, you could be in violation of the Brown Act. When it comes to that item, you might have to recuse yourself because you've already publicly made a decision on that. And so essentially you're not considering the information given to you and by the public to make that decision. Additionally, if you as an elected council person have a conversation with 2 or more other council folks, you're having a serial meeting, especially if it's about a city related matter, and that is a violation of the Brown Act. It's really important that you remain open and gather information and don't publicly disclose your thoughts, opinions, ideas on matters before the city council, because those could potentially preclude you from weighing in and having a decision at a council meeting. One thing I haven't included in here is you would have a harassment training that's required every 2 years. And so that's another requirement of being an elected official. So some important dates. The nomination period opens on Monday, July 18th. It closes on Friday, August 12th. Like I mentioned earlier, should an incumbent not run or not qualify, the nomination period for that office only is extended until Wednesday, August 17th. On August 18th, the Secretary of State will do a random drawing which determines the order that the names appear on the ballot. We will have our council candidate orientation in August, and once I have those dates, we'll share that out. And that is open to the public. It's intended to inform the council candidates, but it's an open to the public event. October 10th, the county likely will begin their mail by vote. They will start to mail their vote by mail ballots. And then October 11th through the 7th is the early voting period. October 24th is the last day to register to vote. Election day is November 8th. And the Registrar of Voters is required to give us, the City of Morgan Hill, the election results by December 8th. We would have a special City Council meeting on December 14th, and that meeting would be solely held to swear in our new elected officials and bid farewell to our outgoing elected officials. I do have our contact information up here on the screen, and like I said, for those folks participating here today, I'll email you this information, and this is on our website. But if you have questions that come up after this, feel free to reach out. Email, honestly, is the best way. We have folks that are telecommuting and in different places, and we do forward our phones, but sometimes email is just the fastest and most efficient way for us. And you can obviously make an appointment to come in and meet with us. You're welcome to come in anytime, but because we are telecommuting, sometimes folks aren't in the office, so I just recommend reaching out to make sure you don't waste your time coming in.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I appreciate your time.